Hi and welcome. I'm Andy Mioch and you are watching A News. Here are the headlines. Donald Trump says he will do everything to ensure that Israel and Hamas adhere to the potential peace deal. The 12th summit of the Organization of Turkic States concludes in Azerbaijan. Syria announces results of its first parliamentary elections since the fall of Assad. Thank you for tuning in. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Washington for his second White House meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump said their talks will focus on tariffs, but gave no indication whether current levies on Canada will be lifted, while also praising Ottawa's efforts to tackle the fentanyl crisis that previously prompted new trade penalties.
Thank you very much, Everett. Never met her, but she's a low IQ individual.
As he was hosting Carney in the White House, Trump also spoke on the potential Gaza deal being negotiated in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh. He said his country is going to do everything possible to ensure a deal is adhered to by both sides.
Well, the primary guarantee is once this deal happens, if it does happen, look, they're in negotiations right now, we are going to do everything possible. We have a lot of power, and we're going to do everything possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal, okay?
Now, mediators of the talks say both Hamas and Israel have agreed on a framework and the agenda for the ceasefire negotiations. Hamas confirmed its delegation is working to overcome all obstacles in the talks held in the Egyptian resort. The group's main demands include a permanent ceasefire, the full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, unrestricted humanitarian access, the return of displaced residents, the launch of a reconstruction plan overseen by a Palestinian technocratic body, and a fair prisoner exchange deal. As the talks in Egypt are underway, let's take a look back at the events of October 7th, 2023. 2 years ago, when Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, igniting the Gaza war.
On the 7th of October 2023, thousands of people were celebrating at a music festival near Israel's border with Gaza when sirens rang out. Hamas stormed across the border, killing some 1,200 people and took 251 hostages. Within hours, Israel had declared war. Airstrikes pounded Gaza. Israel said it was targeting Hamas. Entire neighborhoods vanished in days. By November, more than 15,000 Palestinians had been killed, according to Gaza's Hamas-led health authority. The number of dead is now believed to amount to more than 60,000, and at least 550 aid workers have been killed, the highest toll in any conflict recorded by the Aid Worker Security Database. A brief ceasefire came in late November 2023, allowing aid in and some hostages out in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Lasting just 7 days, when it ended, Israel launched its ground invasion of southern Gaza. By early 2024, fighting had moved to Rafah. By spring, more than 1 million people had been displaced. The United Nations warned of famine. Israel expanded its military operations beyond Gaza, striking targets in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and Yemen. Both Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Iran-aligned Houthi group in Yemen launched strikes on Israel in response. On the 27th of September 2024, Israeli bunker-busting bombs hit a Hezbollah complex in Beirut, killing Hassan Nasrallah, the group's leader of more than 30 years. His heir apparent, Hashem Safadin, was killed weeks later. Israel would also claim to kill Hamas leaders Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Diaf.
The U.S. will take over.
A second three-stage ceasefire brokered by Egypt, Qatar and the United States came into effect in January 2025. Extensive Israel airstrikes resumed in mid-March. This year, the IPC Global Hunger Monitor declared famine in northern Gaza, saying that more than 500,000 people were at risk. Aid groups said Israel was restricting food and medicine. Israel accused Hamas of stealing supplies. Tel Aviv launched an airstrike on Qatar on the 9th of September 2025, claiming to be targeting top Hamas leaders. Qatar condemned the strike as cowardly and a violation of international law. Less than 2 weeks later, the UK, France and Canada were among countries to formally recognise a Palestinian state. The United States opposed the move. A US-led 20-point peace plan has proposed a ceasefire, hostage exchanges and a staged Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Both sides are looking for clarity in the details.
To get a better grasp on the conflict, in the next few minutes we're bringing you a closer look at the origins of Hamas, its guiding ideology and how its enduring conflict with Israel has influenced the modern Middle East.
What is Hamas? Formerly known as the Islamic Resistance Movement, the group was founded in 1987 during the First Palestinian Intifada, or uprising, against Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. Emerging from the Muslim Brotherhood, it combines political activity with armed resistance. The group is designated a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States, the European Union, Britain, Canada, and Japan, though it frames its armed operations as resistance against occupation. A political turning point came in 2006, when Hamas, running under the name Change and Reform, won the Palestinian parliamentary elections, defeating the dominant Fatah movement. The following year, after clashes with Fatah forces, Hamas seized full control of the Gaza Strip, splitting Palestinian governance between Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. Since then, Gaza has faced a strict Israeli and Egyptian blockade. Its population of over 2 million has endured multiple wars, causing widespread destruction and thousands of casualties. The biggest escalation in recent history occurred on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas launched a surprise and deadly attack inside Israel. The ensuing Israel-Hamas war has led to heavy Israeli bombardment in Gaza, where local authorities report over 65,000 Palestinian deaths and widespread famine. Hamas's armed wing, Al-Qassam Brigades, has carried out rocket attacks, suicide bombings, and other operations. Israel has targeted and killed several top Hamas figures. Hamas remains both a militant organization and a political authority in Gaza, shaping the ongoing conflict with Israel. To Palestinians, it can represent armed resistance, but to much of the international community, it is seen as a group responsible for violence and instability. Hamas seeks the recognition of Palestinian claims over historic Palestine. The group maintains that any ceasefire or negotiation must address prisoner releases, Israeli border crossings, and the lifting of blockades, and it frames these demands as non-negotiable for long-term peace.
Over in the UK, student rallies across the country calling for solidarity with Palestinians went ahead as planned, despite warnings from authorities not to hold protests on the anniversary of the Hamas attacks. The British Prime Minister called it un-British. Our Zainab Farajzadeh has more from Manchester.
From the river to the sea, Yeruni is covered in Palestinian blood. These are just some of the quotes from student rallies across Britain, marking the second anniversary of the 7 October attack by Hamas. Students from Sheffield University held placards describing Israel's offensive in Gaza as a Holocaust and calling for the university's divestment from arms companies supplying the Jewish state. Students at the University of Edinburgh have also ignored pleas by university bosses to cancel pro-Palestine protests. Students have been seen outside the university library holding signs that read "Freedom for Palestine" and "Starmer has blood on his hands." Prime Minister Keir Starmer had asked students not to join pro-Palestinian protests, calling it un-British, to hold protests on the anniversary, which he says has been used by some as a despicable excuse to attack British Jews. Starmer stressed that the UK will always stand tall and united against those seeking to harm Jewish communities. University leaders had cautioned students planning to take part in demonstrations, warning them that expressing support for a terrorist organization is a criminal offense. Up to 10 events, variously described as vigils, rallies and marches, were due to take place on or near campuses, including an inter-university march in London involving students and staff from several London institutions. According to Keir Starmer himself, the past 2 years had seen rising anti-Semitism in the UK, including the car ramming and stabbing attack in Manchester, which took place on Yom Kippur and left 2 dead and 3 injured on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Unsurprisingly, there are no such pro-Palestine events scheduled by university students here in Manchester. Zeina Ferarzadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Elsewhere in Europe, outgoing French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu was having last-minute talks with political party leaders on Tuesday in an effort to get the country out of a political deadlock. The latest crisis was triggered by his resignation on Monday, just hours after the cabinet was named. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister and Emmanuel Macron ally Edouard Philippe weighed in, calling on the president to step down early. For more on the unfolding events in Paris, we go to our Anita Sharma and her segment, This Day in Europe.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where outgoing French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu is on a 48-hour mission to conduct final negotiations with party leaders in Paris in hopes of cobbling together a governing platform. He was given the Wednesday night deadline by President Emmanuel Macron. Following the rejection of Lecornu's government by both allies and opponents, he shockingly resigned Monday, barely 1 day after unveiling his cabinet. It was the shortest-lived administration in modern French history. Today, he is scheduled to meet with several members of the conservative Les Républicains and center-right Renaissance parties. Meantime, reaction is intense. Former Prime Minister and Macron's former ally, Edouard Philippe, wants Macron to commit to an early presidential election if a stable government cannot emerge, arguing that the crisis demands a reset at the top. Jordan Bardella, leader of the far-right National Rally, says he supports dissolving parliament, preparing for either a legislative or presidential vote to bring back fresh political clarity. From within Macron's centrist ensemble camp, some voices of discontent are emerging. Former Prime Minister Gabriel Attal criticized Macron's recent decisions, signaling frustration with the repetitive cycle of government reshuffles. On the left, critics argue Lecornu's cabinet was more of a rebrand than a reset, with many of the same faces and no convincing policy shift. Some call the new lineup a, quote, replay of the old, rather than a genuine reform effort. The resource constraint is stark. France is operating without a stable majority, unable to push through its budget or reform agenda. Earlier, Lecornu pledged he would not use Article 49.3. That's a constitutional provision allowing the government to force legislation without a parliamentary vote. It was a decision that reflected political caution. Using it could escalate tensions in an already fragmented assembly, but without it, the government is limited in what legislation it can pass. Macron has hinted that if Le Cornu fails to build consensus, dissolving the National Assembly may be inevitable, triggering snap legislative elections. Trailing market signals and economic stress add pressure. French markets tumbled after Le Cornu's resignation, bond yields spiked, and the yield spread with Germany widened. Repeated government collapses erode investor trust, worsen borrowing conditions, and delay essential reforms. Snap elections could empower the far-right RN, shifting France's trajectory sharply. Macron and moderates may fear that gamble. Macron appears to be boxed here. Either allow instability to persist or risk elections that might cost him power or his legacy. Today's talks may be France's last shot at avoiding full-blown elections. If Le Cornu's effort fails, France could head into a period of intense uncertainty with consequences for Europe, the Eurozone, and global markets. Reporting for A News, I'm Anita Sharma in the Netherlands.
In science news, this year's Nobel Prize in Physics has been awarded to 3 scientists, John Clark, Michel Devoret, and John Martinez, for their discoveries in quantum mechanics, the branch of physics that describes how matter and energy behave at the smallest scales.
The names have been announced for the Nobel Prize for Physics.
John Clark, University of California at Berkeley, USA. Michel Devoret, Yale University and University of California at Santa Barbara, USA. And John Martinez, University of California at Santa Barbara, USA, for the discovery of macroscopic quantum mechanical tunneling and energy quantization in an electric circuit.
These 3 scientists revealed quantum mechanics in action, a fundamental branch of physics that describes how matter and energy behave at the smallest scales. Atoms, subatomic particles, and photons, where classical physics no longer applies. Superposition. Tiny particles can be in more than one state at the same time, like being in 2 places at once, until we measure them. Quantum tunneling. Particles can sneak through barriers that would normally block them. Energy quantization. Energy comes in small chunks rather than flowing continuously. Entanglement. 2 particles can be linked so that changing one instantly affects the other, even far away. This discovery paved the way for modern quantum technologies, from quantum computers to advanced sensors. The award for it not only honors decades of fundamental research, but also shines a light on the technologies of the future, showing how microscopic discoveries can have enormous, real-world impact. British-born John Clark, a professor at the University of California in Berkeley, has spent decades studying superconducting circuits. Michel Devoret from France teaches at both Yale University and UC Santa Barbara, while American John Martinez was the head of Google's Quantum Artificial Intelligence Lab until 2020. The Nobel Prize in Physics comes with a total award of 11 million Swedish crowns, roughly $1.2 million, which is shared if there are multiple recipients, as is the case this year.
Next up, we turn to the world's most eagerly awaited climate event, COP30, as Brazil scrambles to get the Amazon city of Belém ready for a flood of world leaders. The city's racing to finish key infrastructure, from hotels to conference facilities. Officials insist most projects are on track, but delegates are already feeling the squeeze on accommodation and rising costs.
Just 1 month ahead of the United Nations Climate Summit COP30, Brazil is racing to get the Amazon city of Belém ready to welcome some 45,000 delegates. Heads of state will begin arriving soon, but the infrastructure meant to host them is far from complete. The Leaders Village, a cluster of low-rise buildings for visiting presidents, still has unfinished sections. A nearby 3-story building is only partially built, though its helipad will be ready for conference use. The para-state government says more than 30 public works for conference, including roads, parks, drainage channels and tourist sites. Construction is still ongoing on a pier for cruise ships and a terminal for floating hotels, meant to open in July, but only 79% complete. With hotel rooms scarce, delegates are having to get creative, with prices soaring beyond previous conferences. During a visit to Balaam last week, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva downplayed worries over the preparations and sought to boost morale, calling the summit a COP of truth, not luxury, that would highlight the Amazon and Para.
Syria has announced preliminary results from an indirect vote to form a new parliament. The election process, closely watched by the world, is a key step in the country's transition, following the ouster of former President Bashar al-Assad last December.
Election officials acknowledge a low success rate for women and religious minorities in Syria's preliminary results of its indirect vote for the first parliament since Bashar al-Assad's historic toppling last year. Around 6,000 members of regional electoral colleges cast ballots for candidates from pre-approved lists, a process designed to fill nearly two-thirds of the 210-seat People's Assembly. The remaining third will be appointed later by interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa. But many Syrians and observers warn that suspending elections in parts of the country outside government control risked leaving key communities without representation.
We were keen to form the electoral committees to take into account the form of Syrian society. This means that we must be realistic that there is a diverse form of Syrian society, and this diversity is positive. We took into account in the electoral bodies that the form of the electoral bodies be similar to the form of Syrian society to ensure that they are actually capable of representation. But the electoral process is the outcome of the elections. Even if direct elections were held, we might have faced similar results. These are the results because this is the Syrian reality, perhaps.
According to Reuters, 6 women were elected to the new parliament, 4 of them from religious minorities, including a Christian, an Ismaili Muslim, and 2 Alawites.
We also ensured that the percentage of women in electoral committees exceeded 30% in some places, but it appears that the electoral process produced these results. We've tried hard to support women's presence in parliament through awareness campaigns, but we haven't succeeded. Perhaps this is the Syrian reality. In the next phase, there must be greater awareness raising across Syrian society.
Authorities say they chose an indirect voting system because the country still lacks reliable population data after years of war that killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. For security reasons, voting was postponed in several regions, including Kurdish-held areas in the north and the Druze majority province of Sweden, leaving 21 seats vacant. It remains unclear when those votes will be held.
Still with Syria, the country's army and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces have reached a fragile ceasefire following fierce overnight clashes in several Aleppo districts. Residents reported intense gunfire and explosions in the northwestern part of Aleppo city. Officials say 2 people were killed and 26 others injured. The SDF denied involvement, calling the reports provocative. Syrian media described the clashes as the most intense since the March agreement, aimed at integrating Kurdish forces into state institutions after 14 years of war. In Azerbaijan's Gabala, leaders of the Turkic world gathered for the 12th OTS Summit. The meeting concluded with the signing of the Gabala Declaration and the launch of new cooperation initiatives.
All eyes were on Gabala, as the 12th summit of the Organization of Turkic States brought leaders together to define new goals for the region. The summit wrapped up with the Gabala Declaration, a roadmap outlining the shared vision and future direction of the Turkic world. One of the key outcomes was the approval of OTS Plus, a new platform designed to strengthen dialogue with non-member countries. Presidents and prime ministers from member and observer states discussed regional priorities, from energy security to peace and cultural ties. President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, highlighted ongoing work on a green energy corridor linking Central Asia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Europe, and spoke about major joint investment projects among Turkic states.
Hazırda biz Orta Asya, Azerbaycan, Türkiye, Avrupa,
Currently, we are developing a green energy corridor connecting Central Asia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Europe. Azerbaijan and the member states of the OTS have carried out numerous significant investment projects. To date, over $20 billion have been invested in the economies of our fraternal countries. The majority of these investments have been made in the Turkish economy. Additionally, Azerbaijan has established joint investment funds with Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. Through these funds, many future projects will be realized.
Bu fondlar vasıtasıyla birçok layihələr icra edilecek.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan suggested marking December 15th as World Turkic Language Family Day. And he also touched some geopolitical challenges in Gabala.
30 Ekim'den itibaren Semerkant'ta düzenlenecek
I hope that during the 43rd UNESCO General Conference, which will be held in Samarkand starting from October 30th, December 15th will be declared as the World Turkic Language Family Day. Given the many wars and tensions occurring in nearby regions, it's important for the Organization of Turkic States to take a clear stance. We believe that a two-state solution in Gaza would be a just outcome.
Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban praised Azerbaijan's growing role in regional cooperation and thanked President Aliyev for supporting Hungarian investments in the energy sector.
I want to assure the people of Azerbaijan and President Ilham Aliyev that we are not only friends but also strategic partners. At this gathering, strong leaders have come together to exchange views on joint projects and strategic plans for the future. Unlike in Europe, here we see respect for family values and commitment to traditions.
The summit closed on a note of unity, with leaders reaffirming their commitment to cooperation, peace, and a stronger Turkic future.
Joining us now from Astana to talk on the Gabala Summit is Zhanat Mominkulov, Senior Lecturer at the Eurasian National University. Welcome, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with the OTS Plus framework launched today. How far do you see this format expanding, and what countries do you see among the first candidates to join this framework of cooperation with the Turkic states?
Good evening. Thank you for the invite. From my perspective, the OTS Plus format marks a major step in expanding the Turkic project beyond its cultural borders. I think non-member countries can cooperate with the Turkic bloc in pragmatic areas like trade, energy, connectivity. Now we have two formats like dialogue partner and observer already. As for expansion potential, I think that the organization is likely to grow, driven by shared interests in the middle corridor and the Turkic states' rising geopolitical weight. So I think this plus format allows flexibility with no political obligation, making it appealing for other countries seeking balanced diplomacy. First of all, I suppose that the likely candidates might include Hungary and Turkmenistan, which they are already observers with strong political and cultural ties. They may seek for full membership. And next candidate might be Georgia, key transit country for the middle corridor, and also some experts talking about Tajikistan's potential partnership role for regional connectivity, and possibly some Balkan state may join as well. So in my view, there are constraints, of course, sensitivities with Russia, Iran, differing foreign policy alignments, but in near term, I think the OTS Plus will serve as a bridge linking the Turkic world with adjacent regions.
You've mentioned connectivity and the Middle Corridor. Those were, of course, high on the agenda. Leaders spoke on the development of all the logistics and infrastructure. How far would you say that the OTS has come with regards to connectivity, not only within the organization, but also beyond?
Thank you. In my eyes, the OTS has made remarkable progress already in transforming the Turkic connectivity from cultural vision into the strategic reality. So the Turkic region, I think, becomes a real hub linking Europe and Asia. And the Middle Corridor now serves as a foundation for Turkic transport logistics autonomy. The route offers a viable alternative to northern and southern corridors, which are dominated by Russia and Iran. The OTS has achieved significant milestones so far, improved port capacities and infrastructure, digital systems. So I think member states must now move towards further tariff harmonization and standardization, joint logistics management. So this joint coordination mechanism will be critical for investments, for efficiency. Externally, the Turkic connectivity now is gaining global attention as Trump has interest in the Zangezur corridor. This signals growing international recognition and investment potential. Overall, it has advanced from the rhetorical cultural unity to tangible, real cooperation. By strengthening infrastructure security and cross-border integration, our OTS organization becomes a strategic east-west axis across Eurasia, increasingly supported by global powers.
Jana, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insight.
Thank you.
Over in Georgia, a wave of unrest following disputed local elections has prompted the Prime Minister to warn that public gatherings could soon be restricted. His comments were followed by a harsh response from the European Union. Arnini Nikolaishvili brings more from Tbilisi.
Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Qobakhidze has signaled a tougher stance on dissent, saying that any public gathering this year may face restrictions under law and international standards. He accused a small, violent minority of trying to hold the country hostage, promising what he called a methodical response to those responsible for what he described as 1 year of violence by 100 people against 4 million. The warning follows last weekend's local elections marked by low turnout and clashes in Tbilisi, where police used water cannons and tear gas to disperse demonstrators. Authorities say that 5 activists have been charged with plotting a coup after some protesters tried to breach the presidential palace on the 4th of October. Parliament Speaker Shalom Apashvili blamed the unrest on former President Salome Zurabishvili and alleged what he called foreign patrons seeking to install her as the legitimate leader, a claim that opposition groups dismiss as politically motivated fiction. From Brussels, the European Commission spokesperson Anita Hipper sharply condemned the government's rhetoric. She said that the EU has scaled back political contact with Georgia over what it calls democratic backsliding. Human rights organizations are warning that any move to restrict peaceful assembly would further isolate the country from its European path and deepen an already polarized society. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Pope Leo is set to visit Turkey and Lebanon from November 27th to December 2nd. It will be his first trip abroad since becoming the pontiff. In Turkey, he will stop in Iznik to mark 1700 years since the First Council of Nicaea, a key event in Christian history. The Basilica of St. Neophytus on Lake Iznik, believed to have hosted the council, has recently reappeared as water levels have dropped. Leo will be the 5th pope to visit Turkey after Pope Francis in 2014. The trip will continue in Lebanon, where he's expected to highlight the country's humanitarian challenges as it hosts around 1.5 million Syrian refugees, according to the UN. Kazakhstan is boosting its oil exports to Europe, with Germany set to increase imports by 30% starting next year. At the same time, Turkey is entering the Kazakh oil market. Our Fariza Kalimurzina has all the details.
Kazakhstan's oil supplies to Germany are set to increase by 30% starting in 2026, rising from 100,000 to 130,000 tons per month. This was announced following a meeting between Askat Kasenov, chairman of Kazmunaygas, and Johannes Brem, CEO of Rosneft Deutschland. Since early 2025, Germany has received about 1.5 million tons of Kazakh oil. This crude arrives at a refinery in Schwedt via the Druzhba pipeline, which runs through Russian territory. The change in suppliers came after the EU imposed a ban on Russian oil imports in December 2022. Faced with this embargo, Berlin turned to Kazakhstan and other alternatives to secure its energy needs. And despite sanctions, deliveries continue through Transneft's main pipeline system. While Kazakh exports along this route remain stable, Astana is actively working on diversifying its export routes. According to Askat Kasenov, by the end of this year, Kazakhstan plans to send 1.2 million tons of oil via the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan route and at least 1.7 million tons to Germany. In the long term, the country aims to produce around 100 million tons annually. Meanwhile, it has been announced that the Turkish Petroleum Corporation is entering the Kazakh market. The Turkish state oil company will start operations on 2 oil fields, which exact sites will be developed has not yet been specified, but it's likely they are located along the Caspian Sea coast. The extracted oil is expected to be transported to Turkey through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. This will strengthen Ankara's role as an energy hub and allow Kazakhstan to increase supplies while bypassing Russian infrastructure, including the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A-News.
Iran says that 1 million illegal Afghan refugees have already returned to their country in the last 6.5 months. Tehran claims most of the returns were voluntary and came as part of the plan to reduce the number of undocumented refugees to 2 million in this year. Artura Shiralilu has more.
Since Iran's New Year on the 21st of March, around 1 million undocumented Afghan refugees have returned to Afghanistan, according to the IRNA news agency. The report said that Governor of Taibad in Khorasan Razavi province, Hossein Jamshidi, told the county's administrative council members that 90% of unauthorized Afghan citizens voluntarily left through the Dogharun border. He also said that during the past 80 days, all of them were treated according to humanitarian standards. Last month, Iran's Interior Minister Iskandar Momeni had said that a total of 2 million undocumented Afghans would be gradually repatriated by the 20th of March next year. However, Iran says it plans to allow 3 million documented Afghans to stay to match the 3% global standard. Currently, the population stands at 87 million and will hit 90 million next year. Meanwhile, the International Organization for Migration has praised Tehran's services to Afghan refugees. On Monday, the Senior Director of Office of Strategy and Organizational Performance, Kim Elling, appreciated Iran's efforts in hosting Afghan nationals. He made the comment at a meeting with the Deputy Minister of Interior, Said Mohammad Batai, in Geneva, which was on the sidelines of the Executive Committee of the United Nations Refugee Agency. Batai said the reduction in aid from donor countries was a huge challenge, according to an IRNA article. The Iranian official also said that despite the sanctions, Tehran has provided outstanding services to the Afghan refugees over the past 4 decades and expressed hope that the donor countries will allocate assistance to the refugee support programs. The majority of refugees in Iran are Afghan nationals who fled to the neighboring Iran from the war and the civil war in their country in the last 40 years. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, A News TV.
Afghanistan's foreign minister has arrived in the Russian capital to attend the 7th Moscow Format Consultative Meeting on Afghanistan, marking a first for the Taliban-led government. Our Tamim Bahis has more on that in Kabul.
Minister Muttaqi's visit to the Moscow format meeting comes at the official invitation of the Russian Federation, signaling a shift in regional engagement with Afghanistan's de facto authorities. For the first time, Afghanistan is participating as an official member, although the Taliban government had taken part in previous rounds as observers or as invited guests. The meeting in Moscow brings together senior representatives from Russia, India, Iran, and China, as well as Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, and also Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. According to Russian media, discussions will center on Afghanistan's national security, regional stability, and economic cooperation. During the session, Minister Muttaqi is expected to outline Kabul's stance on strengthening ties with neighboring countries and boosting regional development and trade. The Moscow format has been a key regional platform on Afghanistan since 2017, and the gathering could set the tone for how regional actors deal with Kabul ongoing forward. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned to A News.